Good morning, Mike. Good to see you again, my friend. Your beard
Morning.
is coming in almost as nicely as mine.
Almost, not quite, not even actually, not even close. Look
Although,
at
to
you.
be fair, you've been growing yours for like a week. I've been growing mine since quarantine started. This is literally 4 months worth of effort.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, no, I shaved it off a couple times, and I think I'm just gonna roll with it at this point. My hair, though, woo! Look at
Dude,
that. You've
bro,
never even seen me with hair, have you?
I
Probably
didn't even know
never.
you had hair.
Yeah, I really don't. My receding hairline is horrific, but you know,
Dude,
I
but
try.
I mean, if you grow that out, man, we're talking some 1970s funk going on, dude. You're gonna have to get a bass and start just playing out in the streets.
Bro, dude, don't even get me started. If it wasn't for these two large bald patches at the top, though, then like right here.
Dude, no, that's oh man, you look like you almost have like an old like 1800s hairdo going on, dude. Like the Frederick Douglass with the hair just like boom going on the back, little thing going on top.
Get it.
Get
Get
it,
it.
man. On the note, on the Frederick Douglass note, man, I think before we jump into things, we got to pay respect to quite literally a living civil rights legend who passed away the other day.
Yeah, dude. So definitely John Lewis. Yeah, that's
I was reading some interesting facts about him. Arrested 40 times during the civil rights movement, and then once he became a congressional member, arrested another 4 times, which is insane to just even ponder those two facts alone, and to see where he came from and to the seat that he was able to attain and for the length of time he was able to sit at that table is nothing short of remarkable, considering his life, man. I mean, we're talking about a living legend. Well, no longer living, rest in peace, but a
was it
legend,
like
man, like a tour de force when it came to the civil rights movement.
absolutely. And was it like 17 consecutive terms, something like that? It's insane. Not to
Yeah,
mention a victim of police brutality, and one of
yeah,
doing
yeah.
trying to peacefully protest. There you go again.
You know, and I
Absolute
think,
absolute legend.
yeah, I've been watching a lot of conservative-minded folks that have a darker pigment than me, and I can understand their frustration at the notion, perhaps, that people within communities need to do a better job of improving their situations so that they don't interact with the police. But I think when you're effectively treated like an animal and put into a cage, so to speak, whether it's jail itself or whether it's a community that is disenfranchised and is not meeting the standards of living that other places nearby are being given, it's you're creating a recipe for disaster. So I think that it needs to be we need to burn the candle at both ends in this sense, in that funding needs to be taken from police but not frivolously given away. It needs to be reinvested into the community so that these people that live in these communities, whether it's Black, Hispanic, or any color of the spectrum, they need to have the resources in order to come up. And a rising tide can only lift boats when the boat doesn't have a hole in it. If you're in a community that has a hole, that's full of holes, it doesn't matter how much water you put in to lift these boats, they're going to sink anyways. So you have to treat the root problem, which is, I think, it's the feeling of desolation and the desperation in these communities that is not being met, and it's being met with force instead of resources.
Absolutely. And that's my fear too, is that we're going to potentially have a society where we start getting, I think, wise and defunding the police, at least, cutting the budget significantly. But
Yeah,
then that money is going to end up back in politicians' pocketbooks, or it's going to go, to other things that are just completely unnecessary. I mean, the idea behind this is to increase the resources, for the lower income neighborhoods, increase the
yeah.
education, especially if we can get the education
The infrastructure in general,
infrastructure
the
in general,
infrastructure in
right?
general, and I think public schools in those communities are like a direct, you can see directly what happens when the resources are not being given to the places that need it the most, right? If you're in a community that is using textbooks that are 20 years old because the property taxes within your given district don't actually fund school improvements, or you have teachers that are basically putting out of pocket hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for their kids to have school supplies, if they're sitting in chairs that are not reinforced because they're old and they can't afford to fix them, you're creating a system in which people that go to these schools are already 2 or 3 steps behind their counterparts in a community that is maybe a mile or two away, just because of the funding that's coming in, right? So I think this, and this is something that I think the far left, the crazy, in my opinion, far left extremists are sort of missing the point when they're yelling at the top of their lungs, abolish the police. I think the message is hindering what the progress really needs to be, which is we need to take money and redistribute it, right? It needs to be reallocated in ways that enable these communities to lift themselves up rather than more policing, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you still need police in some ways, right? Like if someone's breaking into your house, you may not be comfortable owning a gun. So who are you supposed to call? You need to call somebody when you're feeling threatened, when your life is possibly in danger.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, if you're someone who's having a mental breakdown, the last thing you probably need is some aggressive, militarized officer trying to calm you down, because that's not going to work.
Right.
So there needs
also,
to be,
if you have like a tail light out, it may not need an armed, aggressive officer to sort of try to de-escalate that situation. Because when you bring a gun to a knife fight, so to speak, you're not de-escalating the situation, you're making it absolutely worse, right? You're leaving a potential for things to happen that otherwise probably wouldn't have happened, right? And I think that's the thing. Like, can we have specialized individuals that roll around and maybe stop people, but hey, your tail light's out, I could fix this for you.
Or like various divisions within the police force, right? Like you have specific,
exactly.
like specific officers that are trained to de-escalate situations that maybe you're also trained in, hand-to-hand combat in a way that keeps them safe, so that they feel like they can approach a situation and know that they can take care of themselves. But also they're trained as the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth steps to try and de-escalate a situation. You shouldn't be walking up to a car with your hand on your gun, with your finger on the trigger from the get-go, because you're just asking for a quick, split-second decision to turn deadly, right? Like look at Philando Castile, for instance, right?
Exactly.
And he even was calm and admitting that he had a gun. He was a registered gun owner, and he had a concealed carry permit. And he still, as he was reaching for his identification inside his glove box, which he was instructed to do, he was shot and killed. And I think, again, the idea of abolishing the police, I know the word is a hot button word, but I don't think personally abolishing the police is not what that is supposed to mean. But it's become a rallying cry from the far right saying how crazy the left is. And people on the far left are saying that abolishing the police is exactly what we need. And you want to go to like lawlessness. You want to have people running around with guns in their own, like gun in every house, gun in every hand. Like that's not going to work either.
No. Absolutely not, because we have a lot of trigger happy citizens as well, especially in conceal and carry states. And, we see a lot of situations on a day-to-day basis, like the Chipotle situation with that white couple that just pulls a gun because they felt threatened by a black woman and her 15-year-old daughter. Like, come on, man. Like, if you have a gun, when you talk about suicide, for example, households with guns tend to result in higher percentage of suicides, right?
I mean, every sort of violent action that is gun motivated or gun instigated, it's almost like there are direct lines and parallels between places where guns are high in concentration and places where there are higher instances of gun violence, right? Like you can see it within the Department of Justice's statistics. You can see that places where guns are more ubiquitous, there are higher instances of gun-related issues. Mm-hmm. Like on a per capita basis, right? It's hard to compare a state like Alabama to a state like California because we're talking like twice the population. So there's
twice.
Yeah.
Like 20, 30 times the population.
You know what I mean? So like it's often talking about, well, California is like restricting guns and they have far more instances of violence. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's also like 10 times the population. So on a per capita basis, you have to look at it in terms of a population versus the number of guns, not just the number of people that have guns living in a given state with such a huge population. Those are you're intentionally conflating the problem. But now that we've sort of covered those bases, let's talk about your project, man.
Alma the Unicorn. So I decided to write a kid's book. This is sort of, I think, kind of, it was birthed for a lot of different reasons. So I'm a biracial individual. I'm black and white. I'm about 66% white or so, 33% black. My 23andMe looks kind of like it's a jumbled mess, but you can sort of summarize it as that. And I'm biracial. My wife is Chinese, so my daughter is triracial. And one thing I notice, as we're children, we don't really know per se. We don't have any rules to how we adapt friendships and that sort of thing. So a lot of the things, a lot of times kids will look to other kids that are very similar to them because it's easy, right? You look like me, you talk like me. I guess you're supposed to be like kind of like me. But I kind of pondered a question: what will a triracial girl do when she shows up to school and there's nobody else that looks like her, that acts like her, that's quite like her, because she's very much different, right? And I'm starting to sort of predict some of the argument or some of the discussions that my daughter and I will have in the future about, why am I so different, and why, this is why is this not a bad thing? Because I think a lot of times if you read books, especially, they portray people or individuals and characters who are very different, and they have a hard time fitting in, and they want to be normal, right? They want to be quote unquote normal. But there is no normal. There is no normal. Just because you don't look like anybody else doesn't mean that you're not normal. And I really wanted to write a book or write a piece that sort of showcases why diversity is amazing. And, the simple fact that differences kind of propel the world, right? I think this was also spurred after the George Floyd murder and some of the race division that was really tense. I think I kind of use that as an opportunity to really make a difference. And I'm not saying this book's going to get out to everybody. I expect maybe a very small amount of people to buy it, to support it and read it. But I'm hoping that it makes a difference, especially for children. And I think we need to gravitate towards a world where we don't look at people and see color and see religion and see these other just factors that don't really determine character. I think we really need to start understanding that diversity is key. One of the most beautiful things about the United States of America is the diversity. And I mean this wholeheartedly. And this is what I mean. We've done so much as a country in 250 years, right? And the only reason for that is because of diversity. Everywhere else you go with all these other countries, you take like England or Japan or China or Russia, anywhere in the Middle East, you have a whole entire population of people who look very similar and think very similar, right? And from a sociological perspective, and this is what I study in school, sociology perspective, we have groups of people that think similarly. It's very good in unison to sort of accomplish things, but at the same time, you're going to be restricted by a similar thought process, right? Because a lot of people will approach these ideas from the same way. Well, the United States of America was very different because you have all of these different cultures, you have all these different religions, you have all of these different experiences sort of morphed in together, right? So when culturally we came to a problem, there was a lot of different ways to look at that, right? And that's why in 250 years, we went from a country that defeated the greatest empire, maybe ever, or one of the greatest empires ever, to this lowly, very unsophisticated place to the world's forefront powerhouse, at least up until a little while ago, right? Diversity is key and is good. And I really wanted to write a book that sort of captures that and the differences. So, I wrote about volleyball, which is my favorite sport. And we have a team of very diverse animals. The main character is a unicorn, because we know unicorns don't really exist, but if they did, it would be probably the most diverse creature out there. And so you have a team of very, very, very diverse individuals versus a team that's very, I guess, one-sided. It's a singular wolf opponent. And, we're going to talk about why the diversity on this team sort of makes them a little bit harder to beat than just a straight, basic team. So it was a fun project. My wife really pushed for, she wanted to do something. She's not really somebody who likes to just kind of sit around and waste her time, which is incredible. So she wanted to really work on this project. And I think she believed in sort of my rhyming and elementary writing skills. And so we wrote this book, and I know that you got a chance to take a look at the rough draft.
Yeah. I think in this day and age, it's incumbent upon parents to do a better job than their predecessors at instilling this notion of diversity is growth and diversity is important into the younger generations, because ultimately we learn the most from people that we are most interconnected to, right? So if you're being taught from a young age that this group doesn't look like you, so you should fear them, that's going to become your default setting. And once that becomes habitual, it's almost impossible to turn it off. You have to really make a concerted effort over time to get rid of it. But if you're taught from a young age that diversity is key, people that look like you are not different. They are different, but they're not really different. They just have a different, they're wearing a different shirt, so to speak. Like, just because your face is different than mine is almost the equivalent of wearing a different shirt.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not, the inside is what matters. And on the inside, we're all the same, right? We all have muscle that holds our bones together. We all have, hearts and lungs, and we all bleed the same. And this idea that people are different just because of how they look has in a lot of ways set the potential progress of America back in a lot of ways, right? But I do think, to your point, our belief, at least in some respects, that diversity is important and diversity breeds growth has become a common trend in a lot of other Western countries, right? You see it a lot in England too. You see it in France and Italy and Germany. You see a lot more folks that don't necessarily all look the same congregating in same spaces and growing together. And I think it's important at a young age to start that mentality, right? So, and that's one thing that I fear with America, with this current division that we're getting, is people are becoming more tribalistic, which is, I think, a regression in a lot of ways. And we need to do better by our kids. And I think it's imperative and important and great that you've taken the steps to try and at least put something out there that will breed and foster that thinking.
Sort of the hope, right? Like, you can only do so much, but at least you try. And I think that for these kids, they take these subliminal messages and they really get it, right? So for example, my mom is not like, you can't call her racist, but she would also often describe herself as prejudiced. And I think it was interesting that it almost seemed like she was proud of the way that she would describe that. Like, I'm prejudiced, I think this certain way, I believe in stereotypes, this kind of thing. But for me as a kid, I probably would have grown up thinking the same way had it not been for reading a eclectic variety of books. And obviously, from a young age, sort of befriending a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And I'm proud to say that I might be one of the least, I don't think you can scale prejudice, racism, or any of those type of matters, but I might be one of the least of any of those, of anybody that I know, right? I'm completely open to everybody, and I've never judged anybody for anything other than the content of the character. And I can really, truly, really vouch for that. But it was really through books and subliminal messages that I would read through these books without even really knowing that this is what was happening, right? Like, I remember like a Bernstein Bears book when they're all bears, right? Everybody's a bear. They're all brown grizzly bears, but then their neighbors move in and they're panda bears, right? And they're a little scared of the panda bears because they look different, but then they get to know each other and they get to swap out, and it turns out they all become best friends because they're just great people. And these type of books really made an impression on me personally growing up. And it's kind of nice to be able to do the same. I think be able to do the same for other people. Parents are always going to teach so much, but parents are always going to be restricted to the boundaries of which they have lived their lives. And sometimes it's just really good, but sometimes it's not so good, right? Like I said to my mom, I don't believe she was trying to be harmful per se. It's just that was the boundaries that she had grown up in, and that was what she was accustomed to believing. So I think it's really important sometimes for parents to try to open up, but when you can't, you need help from media, from books, from other avenues, so to speak, to sort of teach your kids these lessons. And that's kind of what my goal was when I was writing this, when I was thinking about this. And that's that I would state is sort of my goal for this book in general, is to, hey, maybe a kid that may have grown up to think a certain way, and I'm not saying destructive per se, but to maybe have certain prejudices or certain stereotypes in their mind. Maybe a book like this helps alleviate that to some degree.
I think in a lot of ways too, the traveling aspect, like when you travel, you tend to see that people all over the world have the same sort of hopes, desires, dreams, fears, and problems that you do. And if you can't travel on an airplane or by car to a different place, the only other way you can travel is within your own mind, right? So whether that's a book or a movie or a documentary, they're imperative in teaching people how to look at the world and how to see that in reality, there's a lot more, even if you don't speak the same language, even if you don't have the same religion, there's far more that unites us than divides us. And that is true between us and people who live on North Sentinel Island, and as it is to people who live in the apartment next door to me, right? You don't realize that until you actually have those conversations, or you don't believe that until you start having these trips within your mind, whether it's a physical trip or an internal trip where you're getting something out of a book or out of a movie that you're watching that teaches you that in reality, unity and coming together and understanding that we're all inherently one species and we all share the same hopes, dreams, and desires is is what makes us all human, is what unites us.
Not to mention the fact that it should be noted that 99.99% of the people out there in this world are peaceful, loving individuals who do not wish harm on you at all. And it's a very select, and I mean, obviously I'm making the statistic up, but it's a very select individual population that is divisive and wants to divide. And the reason why I say this is because I think we have this tendency to feel that other countries or people from other countries don't like us, dislike us, want us dead, so on and so forth, because we see extremists. Put off by us might be a correct term. Not necessarily interested in getting to know us. Those type of things might be true, but nobody wishes harm on each other. But this is one of those, I think, crutches of nationalism, because we live within the same borders with a lot of individuals. And I think that we're sort of taught to have something against everybody else around the world. And so when people come from other places, we sort of turn that feelings towards them in general. And it's like I said, diversity can be, it's almost like a double-edged sword. It's one of the best things in the history of the world, right? But it's also one of the sort of damaging things in the world too, because we tend to group with people that, like I said, look like us, think like us, talk like us. And so we build up these walls with other people when there's so much to learn. And it's just kind of an unfortunate thing, because again, you know, we're not nomads anymore. We don't roam the planet where everybody's your enemy and it's sort of like a free for all, besides like the 10, 15 people that you're kind of hanging out with, right? We live in these modern societies and you kind of have to stand up with other individuals. But I think what we really need to do as a planet is start standing up together as an entire planet and understanding that there are probably other species out there, or there are going to be other problems out there that is going to take a collective Earth to defeat.
Boy,
And
dude, are you dropping Independence Day's plot right now?
that's going to be the sequel to Alma the Unicorn. Is Alma Unicorn and friends fight the aliens, bro?
I think, dude, I think to your point, and this is where I think people oftentimes like to castigate the globalist movement, right? This whole globalist movement is oftentimes chastised and lambasted by folks on the far right who are super nationalist, and people in other countries who are very nationalist intrinsically, right? But in reality, it's like moving forward. The only way to move forward is by working together on common problems, right? And fighting things together. We don't live in as much of a nomadic, tribalistic society as I think people think we do.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a global economy. Money moves across the world at the click of a button. And this idea that we need to quarantine our resources so that we can become the top dog, that's not how you get to the top of the mountain, right? The best leaders are the ones who lift everyone else up to their level, right? A manager is someone who says, you do this. A leader is someone who says, let's do this together and get to the common goal, right? And that's where I think over the last, few years is where America sort of taken a turn, right? We've become more tribalistic. We've become more individualistic, which is not progressive. And I understand that people want to hold on to their heritage, for whatever that word means to people. They want to hold on to their heritage. They want to be American. They want to be this and that. But you can still be American. You can still have American values while also being globally aware that your actions are no longer solely going to impact your community. They could have worldwide impact. And, if we're not willing to work together, we're going to move backwards. The only reason we got to where we are today as a world and more specifically as a country is because we were willing to work and do work with other countries in order to reach a common good, right? World War I, World War II, et cetera, right? These are all movements that sort of happened on a global scale. This wasn't just some backwoods idea that Americans had to try and take the position and take the mantle as a world leader. It happened because we saw a wrong and we stepped in to try and do something about it. And whether the mitigating factor was, Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor, whatever the case is, we stood with the rest of the world to fight against this idea of Nazism and, effectively German nationalism as a means to do what's right. And as a result of that, and for the next, 40 years, we were seen as sort of the pillar of coming together and strength. And we've sort of lost that and I would even say even before Trump, man, we probably lost it, a while ago already. And we're trying to find a way to get it back, but we're going about it the wrong way. right? To become a world leader, to become the top of this mountain is not going to be about, quarantining our own resources and making other people pay for it, but it's about working together with all of the best minds and the smartest people worldwide and coming together and bringing everyone up.
That's the problem, and you sort of touched it on the head of the nail there. We talk about resources, which is the most important thing. Resources in general, right? The problem with the world is we have individuals. I mean, it's a corporation, right? The world is a giant corporation, and you don't make money by finding solutions that are sustainable. You make money by hoarding resources and then selling them off at the highest price, correct? That's why we go to war over things like oil, for example, obviously. And that's the problem with our planet, is that we are so keen on this greed and this concept of greed. And it's such a short-sighted goal, right? Because the resources will always run out. You burn through the planet and you have no chance to go back. What you said is absolutely correct. We should be working on solutions. So how do we power the entire world without destroying it? Can't use oil anymore. So what's the next step? Obviously, there's no money to be made in geothermal. There's really no money to be made in solar in the grand scheme of things, right? Because you can't control the sun and you can't control the temperature of the earth, right? You can't privatize that. And so the onus is not, for most people, for the greedy people, is not to sort of work this direction, right? And that's why they keep us divided. So we have reasons to invade other countries. We have reasons to sort of go after those resources and hoard them for ourselves, because we have a very narrow-minded corporate agenda. And that's what's problematic. And as people, we can't really do much about that, except we can resist this idea that we have to hate our neighbors, because we don't know why we're hating our neighbors. They tell us it's because they're dangerous, but these people are not dangerous. Other people aren't inherently dangerous, right?
There's nothing more dangerous than instilling the idea that someone else is dangerous.
Exactly. They just have something that we want, and that's what we're being told to sort of hate them for. And this is like you said, this is incredibly problematic, because 20 years ago it seemed like our planet could probably go on forever, but now those sites are sort of shrinking. Like, maybe sometime in our lifetime we're going to have to figure out some solutions, otherwise we may not continue. I mean, I would almost bet my bottom dollar that our grandkids for sure are going to be on the brink of some sort of disaster if they cannot get this figured out now before it's too late. So these books, these idea of bringing the world together, sort of in a long-term sense, like in a much more macro sense, is sort of an idea that, look, like, if we don't start seeing people differently, if we don't start working together from a global scale, there's not going to be an earth to privatize, to be corrupt with, right? But again, it doesn't really matter, because the people that are on this planet doing these things aren't going to be around to have to deal with the consequences of their actions. So it's up to us as the next generation, and especially our kids, to see things differently if we're going to have anything change.
It's so obvious to me, right? Because however many years ago we had the Congress created Dust Bowl, we had the Spanish flu, we had all these things that we thought were going to quote unquote end civilization or could potentially bring it to its knees. And we haven't heeded those lessons. And we're currently on pace to do far worse with far more people, right? We're talking about orders of magnitude of a greater world population. There's more people in hunger now in some places than there have ever been. And there are enough resources within the richest countries in the world to eliminate all poverty, basically, to eliminate all world hunger. But the problem is that doesn't make money, as you said. The idea, especially within the Food Administration, is to create this illusion of scarcity. There is plenty of food. America alone destroys roughly 50% of the food that it brings in and produces because it expires. And the idea of an expiration date is entirely arbitrary. It's actually got nothing to do with the expiration of the product. It's about creating scarcity. It's like, it was like the blood diamonds in Africa, right? It was this idea that, oh, these diamonds are super rare, when in reality, they're probably everywhere, but you just have to go find them. But you have to create this illusion of scarcity in order to make something inherently valuable. And unless you can do that, then there is no value in something, right? So you have to create value by making it scarce. And in doing so, you're creating this vast wealth distribution for the people that can find these resources and then distribute them at whatever price they want, and the people that need to buy it.
And the sad thing about it is there's enough wealth for people to be greedy, corrupt, and make $1 billion gajillion, and still for everybody on the planet to eat. If you tax Jeff Bezos 1%, you'd effectively kill poverty.
Dude, if you tax him 4%, you could pay for everyone's fucking Medicare, basically.
Everybody's Medicare, dude. If you tax him probably 10%, you could probably solve every problem on the planet.
Right? And like,
not an exaggeration.
You know what taxing him 10% does? It takes him from $150 billion to $135 billion.
and this is not even an exaggeration. This is what's disgusting about this planet. Like, I remember read this statistic. It's like, if you were Christopher Columbus, or if you were alive during Christopher Columbus's time, and you made $10,000 every day since 1492,
You would
you
still be
still
less.
wouldn't have $1 billion. And Jeff Bezos has $167 billion.
They're saying that in his current projection, he's going to be the first individual trillionaire by 2030. That's not necessary. It's so beyond unnecessary. And look, I'm all for
the amount of money that most countries really like strive to have.
Alone, I think, is already more wealthy than like a third of the countries out there.
It has to be at least a third, man. If it's not even half at this point, like, it has to be at least a third. It's just unnecessary. And I understand capitalism. And I understand that we have to stand by morals, and we can't necessarily treat people unfairly. But why can't we just imply a slightly higher tax based on your profit, like how much money you make? And I get that it isn't fair for capitalistic society. There's no right way to do this. I understand that. You can't tax everybody the same because it's not fair to the poor, but you can't tax everybody the same rate from a ratio perspective because it's not fair for the rich. I get it. But when does the levee have to break? We can't have this society where there's extreme poverty just so some people can have unnecessary wealth. It doesn't make any
think about it, right? The only way for someone to amass that kind of wealth is for other people to have less of it. That's like, I mean,
way less of it.
This is simple. I mean, it's simple math. It's simple economy, right? In order for someone to have a fuck ton of resources, that means someone else or a large group of someone else's have to have a very small amount of resources, right? And I don't see people who make, poor income saying, hey, I want to be paid $1 million a year to be a barista at Starbucks. But what they are saying is, fuck, dude, I want to be able to live in the city where I work, but I can't because I live in fucking, Dublin, and I commute all the way to fucking San Francisco to teach at this school or to work at this shop because I can't afford to live here. So instead I wake up at 4 a.m. and I take a 2-hour commute all the way into the city just to make enough money to live 2 hours away from where I work. It's
to make enough money to like.
There's no quality of life there either.
Yeah.
Then you start creating the snowball effect of people who have, they're tired, they're disparate, they're stressed all the time, they're anxious, they're worried about all of these different things that, rich people, for lack of a better word, couldn't give two fucks about, because when you're rich, what do you really have to worry about? Oh, I have to worry about making my next million. That's what you're worried about. When you have that much money, it's where do I make my next million? Where do I make my next billion? Not how do I put food on the table for my family?
Right.
Any rich person who's, who's amassed a wealth of, over 7 digits that's saying I'm worried about putting food on my table, you can shut the fuck up because you're full of shit.
You shut the fuck up, or you make really, really bad financial decisions. And I'm talking really piss poor financial decisions. And I don't know. I think what the really mind-boggling portion is about is that these people have tricked half of our country into defending them. How is that even a thing? How is that a thing?
How is someone who works at, and I hate to use
half the population into fighting against stuff that would genuinely help them out?
I don't want to use Walmart as a pejorative, but like, how are people that work at Walmart how are people that working at Walmart saying we don't want to raise taxes on the rich? Like, dude, first of all, it won't affect you at all. If anything, it will create more money and more tax dollars that will go into resources that you may need one day, or your kids may need one day, or your friend may need one day, or your neighbor may need one day, or someone that you don't even know who's struggling might need it. And where did this idea of I'm better than my neighbor, so I don't care about money going to my neighbor who needs help, where did this mentality come from? You know what I mean? Like,
even if that's the thing, why if you want to be greedy and selfish, that's fine. That's just evolution. But at the end of the day, why are you so dumb that you don't want more money coming into yourself? Right? Because if you're working at Walmart, I'm sorry, your quality of life is not going to be as high as it probably should be. And that's just, as a citizen of this world, I think you should be able to afford the simple things. You shouldn't have to worry about food on the table. You should have access to healthcare, and you should have a stable
roof. Working full time, you should be able to afford, if you're working full time, you should be able to afford rent, and you should be able to get at least some basic subsistence level healthcare.
Absolutely. And you should also have some, be able to afford, like you said, be able to afford a place to live in, right? And you should also be able to comfortably feed your family. And that is all there is to it. That's all there is to it. I'm sorry. This is what we've worked as a society. You do enough for society as a full-time employee that you should be allowed these things. That is the only argument. And I'm sorry, I will not listen to anybody say anything differently. If you are a functioning individual in society, you are doing something something that is important. And it's obviously we can rank the level of importance, but at a base minimum, you're doing something for somebody else. You should be afforded those simple things. I'm not saying you need to live in a 2-story fucking mansion. Pardon my language. I know we said we're going to keep this clean, but
We
we're the kids books today. But I'm not saying you need to live in a 2-story mansion. And I'm not saying you need to have the ultimate all-star type healthcare or be able to eat 5-star cuisine every single night. But you shouldn't have to worry about these.
You know what's funny, dude? I mean, what I think is hilarious is that we live in California, and you just said 2-story mansion, which is like,
Yeah.
like
Walmart employees might actually be able to afford 2-story mansions everywhere else.
I think you hit the nail on the head, man. We have forgotten what it means to be part of a community, and I think there is a direct line between partisan politics and this idea of an us versus them mentality. And I'm not to say that partisan politics haven't existed since the advent of politics, but we've become so hegemonic in the way that we view ourselves versus how we view our neighbors, in terms of the political party that we affiliate with, the beliefs that we have, that no one's willing to even have a good faith conversation about how to move things forward. And the only way a superpower can continue to be a superpower is if there is a very, very large middle class. And of course, in every civilization, in every society, no matter how much you try and invest into the community, there will always be those that are impoverished, that are homeless because of XYZ reasons that happen. But at this point, we've seen that the top 1% of American wealth has amassed more than the bottom, like 85%. And that's not a good way to be progressive. That's not a good way to move forward. People have less spending power now than they did in the 1970s with more education in their back pockets. It doesn't make any sense.
Coupled with the fact that this society pushes every possible product in front of your face and basically forces you to go out if you don't want to be like socially outcasted, forces you to go out to have shit, have new clothes, have expensive stuff just to fit in. So we make you spend your money that you don't have much of because you've already spent a lot getting an education that is virtually useless today. I mean, it is a really bad recipe. We've seen this in every civilization that has ever existed. You get to a high point, then you get a lot of rich people who get very comfortable at that high point because they're afforded a lot of things, right? And they want to keep that greed with the resources, and it ends up shutting these economies down. And it's just a gigantic perpetual loop. It happened in the Roman Empire. It happens everywhere, right?
I mean, it's happening right now before our eyes, man.
It's literally happening right before.
Like back in the 1700s, we decided, okay, it's time to invoke anarchy because fuck the British Empire. We want to do our own thing. So
they were us then.
Then the revolution came. They overthrew the British government. They formed their own democracy. The democracy they formed a republic. The republic was then therein sort of a republic democracy, a democratic republic. And now we're getting into the point of the oligarchy stage where you have these super rich and powerful families, a very small number of them, that are amassing all of the influence and all of the wealth at the very top. And at some point, and this is why I think you're seeing a lot more, vehemence and anger within these protests, is that people not only are seeing the injustice of George Floyd and the killings of not innocent, but people who don't deserve to be killed. We're seeing the injustices of that, but we also have so much time on our hands that we can truly see behind the veil and the veneer that the government and people in power have placed in front of us. We're starting to see exactly how unfair the system is, right? People, through no fault of their own, have their livelihoods taken away. We're basically told, here's a $1,200 check. Good luck making that work for 4 months and not being able to go out and find a job. And the government basically handed tens and hundreds and trillions of dollars to these large companies, these too big to fail companies, who somehow are too big to fail yet are the first ones who need help, or else they'll fail. And the rest of us, we're left sniffing, we're left eating the crumbs, if crumbs were even left behind, right?
Yeah. We had to fight the seagulls for the crumbs, bro. But these execs need vacations, and that's all it is, right? That's all it is. You bail these companies out, then their executives take that bailout money and then pay bonuses to their other executives.
Well, the perfect example is with the tax break that Trump gave when he first came into the White House. He was like, "Yeah, we're going to give tax breaks to corporations." So they went from a 35% tax bracket to like a 21 or 22% tax bracket. And they were told, yeah, what you guys should do is take that money and reinvest it into your research and development, into hiring more employees, blah, 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 blah. Well, we know what they did. The majority of them did stock buybacks. And you know what stock buybacks do? They don't help me. They don't help you. They don't help even the people that work for the company unless you're sitting on the board with a large, handful of shares within that company, right? So the people at the top got richer, everyone else got poorer. But, I went from a 28% tax bracket to like a 26% tax bracket. Fucking whoop-de-doo, bro. Whoop-de-doo.
Stock buybacks don't even necessarily help your company out, right? It's like
No,
basically falsifying
it helps
information.
shareholders. That's all they do.
It's all it does, right? And this is disgusting. This is disgusting. And let me make this perfectly clear. I don't want the elite to not be elite. I don't. I want them to stay rich. I want them to stay filthy rich because, like it or not, they're the ones that provide the opportunities, the jobs for the rest of us. This is society dictates an absolute necessity for people who are unrealistically rich. This is
whether you want to believe it or not, hierarchies exist for a reason.
That's how it is. It needs
but
to be
if the bottom of the pyramid isn't supporting the top of the pyramid, if the bottom of the pyramid is rotting and eroding, guess what? The top of that pyramid is going to come crashing down and the whole thing crumbles. You need to have a basic level where people can feel like they're progressing. They can feel like they can pay their bills. They're happy. They're comfortable. They're able to spend money frivolously from time to time. But at some point, if you don't take care of the structure, if you don't take care of the substrate that underlines the whole system, it will fall apart. This isn't even like a shocking revelation. This is just simple. This isn't even like a complicated concept. If you don't take care of the foundation of your house will fall over. If you don't take care of your feet, you're not gonna be able to walk. Like, this is just, it's simple.
It should be. And the other portion of this is the education. We can't advance as a society. So eventually you run out of resources when you're not creating new things, right? All the time. And if we're not getting enough people to a level of intelligence where they can potentially create brand new ideas, eventually it runs out. And what happens? It crumbles.
Well,
that's your foundation. Education is always your foundation.
Interestingly enough, there's a podcast that I watch. He hasn't posted anything in a while, but there's a pretty smart mathematician, Eric Weinstein, who basically discussed the twin nuclei problem, which is that back in the 1940s through the 1970s, we discovered the core of the atom versus like how the nucleus of an individual particle operates. And after we did that, there has been effectively a stagnant moving of the innovations that have come out of the science world. I mean, outside of like biotech really, but even there, it's like, it's pretty much stagnated. And while GDP and wealth for the 1% has gone up like this, for everyone else who's not sitting on some board or has not somehow gotten lucky and created Twitter or Facebook, wealth has basically stagnated since the 1970s. And this idea and this illusion that has been created by America that exponential growth is exponential it's not feasible. We live on a planet, like you said, with finite resources. With in and of itself, it has a finite lifespan. This planet is not going to be around in 10 billion years. The sun is going to go supernova. It's going to go fucking red giant, and it's going to eat us. Like, that's what's going to happen. Scientifically, this is provable. This has been proven time and time again in other binary planetary systems. It's going to happen. Yeah. So what we need to realize is that exponential growth is not possible. We need to scale it back and realize that we need to be more realistic with what's coming to us. And we have to figure out a way to make sure that everyone is taken care of. Because if we don't, the poor will eat the rich. And then once the rich are eaten, all the resources and the money and the wealth will disappear in a lot of ways. And then we're just going to be eating each other.
It will. And the reason for that is, unfortunately, the poor tend to be uneducated. And the poor, if you're uneducated, you can't create new things. You cannot create new opportunities. You cannot discover things. We can't learn how to take this leaf and that fucking rock over there and create a sustainable food source, right? We're not going to be able to do that because we're uneducated or we're poor. We don't have these resources, and right? I think it's to a society where,
and I think even beyond that,
where we eat the rich, then what are you going to do?
It's like it's not even just poor. Even if you're a genius, if you're poor, you're in a desperate situation. So logic and reason in a lot of ways tend to go out the window. I don't even think it has anything to do with intelligence, because some of the smartest people that have ever lived have come out of poor, disparate communities. But the problem is, we live in a system where we have basic needs that need to be met. And if our basic needs of shelter and subsistence and wellness are not being met, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what sort of opportunities exist, because your primary function at that moment in time is, how do I put food in my belly? How do I get shelter from this storm? It's not even so much a matter of intelligence. It's a matter of meeting your basic your most basic needs. If you just use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the most fundamental level is food, subsistence, and water. If you can't even get that, how do you even move on to the next thing? How do you fix a system if you're too busy trying to figure out how to put food in your belly? And that's where I think this, again, kind of circling back to the abolish or defund the police idea, it's not a matter of getting rid of police, because, and maybe police is the wrong way to refer to them, right? But because we need peacekeepers, we need people we are able to call in a desolate and devastating situation, because you need somebody to call, right? Not everybody is equipped to handle things on their own. So what if you're quote unquote weaker? You shouldn't be able to call the police and you should just basically fall victim to whoever preys upon you? Absolutely not. So this idea of abolishing all police is ridiculous. But if you improve communities from the ground up, if you fix the streets, if you fix the homes, if you fix the schools, if you fix the community at its root, the tree will grow stronger and firmer and will reach higher plateaus. So, not to keep throwing platitudes out there, but we need to start from the bottom up, right? It's not about giving police tanks. It's not about giving them combat vehicles and Humvees. It's about giving the communities that are most afflicted by the wealth distribution and they're on the poor end of that spectrum. It's giving them the resources that they need so they can go from desperation to progression.
Exactly. It's like, whoops, sorry. Hold on one sec. Okay. It's like, I clicked off the thing by accident. It's like Hammurabi, right? And you've heard of the Code of Hammurabi, right? An eye for an eye. It was a stone tablet that listed like 500 different transgressions and sort of the consequences that came with it. And this was very profound, right? Because during this time, like before this, basically if you did anything, you were just put to death, right? But Hammurabi as a leader sort of, and this is kind of the basis for the U.S. judicial system. Hammurabi as a leader basically realized that it wasn't necessarily, consequences don't keep people away from committing crimes. And this has been proven over and over and over again, right? Like you said, if you were down to your last, you need to eat, you're going to commit a crime. If your kids need to eat, you're going to steal bread. You may never have ever contemplated committing a crime in general, but once it's down to the I'm going to live, or I'm going to die, it's like, look, you take the choice out of it. If they're going to kill me for stealing anyway, but I can't eat, I'm going to die anyway, right? I'm just going to steal the bread and see what happens.
It's a false choice.
Correct.
The choice is to do the right thing and die because you can't eat, or to do the wrong thing and be put to death because you couldn't eat, so you had to steal something. It's a false choice.
I think they call it a Sophie's choice, right? But so he created this thing called the Code of Hammurabi, right? And basically it was the first early, very raw adaptation of the punishment needs to fit the crime, because he realized that the best way to affect crime in a society isn't by increasing the consequences. It's by creating the social structure and improving things like education and just
by improving the baseline for all the people that live within that community. It's, like if you create opportunities and you create benevolence within a community, that, like, the one thing that truly trickles down is good leadership, is good morals, is good ethics. It's not economics. There is no trickle down economics, because the only way it trickles is upward. Like, we can see it within the American paradigm, right? Mm-hmm. But stuff that does trickle down, if I'm working with someone who has a very hard work ethic, but is also very positive and motivating, I'm going to work harder. It's simple. And that sort of mentality will trickle down to everybody who comes in contact. So if you don't start by making the community strong, then the people within that community, the leaves of the branch, so to speak, will start to die and fall off and do what they have to do in order to survive. So you need, like you said, you need to create a system in which everyone feels like they have a chance.
Or even that's what's a chance with, you power the system, and for that everybody gets a share. Everybody does, is able to make the money, is able to, like I said, provide the food, provide the basic needs. Because once you're able to do that, you're going to stop crime almost completely, right? You invest in these societies. That's what's going to happen, right? And that's sort of the point. If we focus too much on punishment, for example, if we said the death penalty for every crime that you commit, imagine stealing a car, right? And you're joyriding down the street and the cops are right behind you. What are you going to do? well, the cops are there. I'm going to get arrested and I'm going to be put to death. So I'm going to try my hardest to get away. And while you're trying to get away, you're going to run over pedestrians. You're going to probably crash your vehicle, and you're going to affect a lot of other people's lives, right? That is not good for society. So we level a crime that says, okay, you stole the car, so you're probably going to get 4 years in jail. But if you just go and do your time, understand the consequences of your actions, then you get to come out and get to rehab and change your life.
Well, and that's a whole other problem, I think, entirely, that we can touch on another time, is that,
oh yeah, we should actually. It's a really fun subject to talk about. It's
penal-
actually more of my, I guess
the
you
penal
call my
system-
expertise as a sociologist, but
the penal system
criminology.
in the United States, in a lot of ways, is not designed for rehabilitation.
No, it's broken. It's completely broken. It's the simple fact that we label people criminals once they've committed a crime, and we never change that sort of
Or like in some states, if you're a felon but you get released for good behavior, you still can't vote.
you still can't vote, and you're never going to get a job again.
Yeah.
Recidivism is the act of recommitting a crime once you're released from prison, and recidivism is like impossibly high. Basically, if you go to jail, you will almost certainly recommit a crime, and it has nothing to do with rehabilitation.
It's like 80 to 90%.
You're going to walk into a world in which you can't get a job, you can't do anything, you're going to be labeled as a criminal, and there you go.
Well, and then you're just perpetuating the same problems that got you there in the first place, right? Hopelessness, desperation,
Drug abuse.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, if no one is helping you improve your situation, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't take it upon yourself to improve your situation, but there needs to be a system in place that enables you to do that. Right. If you're just released on the streets with you have no family, you have no friends nearby, you're basically let out of whatever jail on whatever street corner, and they give you like, here's $20, take a bus somewhere, figure it out. What are you figuring out with $20 in your pocket and a bus ticket? You're going to do the same thing that you did to get you there, because your options are die or eat.
And for a lot of people, especially on drug-related charges, they run out and it's like they can't get a job. So what do? Go buy a brick and try to sell cocaine again, because that's the only way you can make money and provide for your family at this point. And not only that, you're indebted thousands and thousands of dollars for some God knows reason why they send you to jail and they make you pay for it, which doesn't make any sense to me personally. I know you're a criminal, but you shouldn't have to pay for going to jail. That's sort of defeating the purpose. You're setting people, it's like bad student loan debt. You're setting people up for absolute failure every single time. But we know prisons, we could talk about this on another show. We know prisons and privatized prisons and how much of a scam that is in general. So
I mean, if that's not modern day slavery, then people clearly don't know what slavery is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different, but slavery involves like absolutely against your will type imprisonment and beatings and a lot of other things, but you're certainly not getting any kind of anything from it.
I mean, it's modern. It's modern.
It's
not exactly the same, but it's it's the modern day version. It's this is what rehabilitation is, right? We're using this free labor to put.
The free labor portion is absolutely correct, but I think it's disrespectful to actual slaves to say that modern day prison, because it's not like a slave committed a crime and then had to do slavery. No, they got ripped from their homes in most cases, or sold off by
the only common thread I'm making is they're both free forms of labor that the government and the institutions are using for their benefit.
Just wait till corporations, and I wouldn't be surprised if this changes in the next 5 to 10 years, because people are stupid and they'll probably just vote for it anyway. But just wait till corporations are allowed to access prison labor, and then we'll see what happens. When you can have a company like Nike, instead of paying 10 cents to some Chinese kids to do the shoes, we don't have to pay anything to have a prison, right? Just wait. You think it's funny, you laugh about it now, but there'll probably be a day when corporations basically have their own prison systems in general. Like you laugh at it because you think it's not possible, and then you realize
to be fair, like we've been laughing at the notion of comparing America to 1930s Germany, and first and foremost, they're not exactly the same. However,
say it before someone screams at you.
Yeah, right. However, if you look at what's happening in Portland right now, there are government-sanctioned vehicles that are unmarked that are picking up protesters off of the street. Now, if you can't tell me if you can't give me definitive reasons why that is not Gestapo-esque, then you're fucking out of your mind.
And they don't have to identify themselves. They don't have to they run out of the car.
This isn't even like some leftist conspiracy. Ken Cuccinelli literally confirmed this. The guy who runs that department was like, yeah, we did that. But it was only one person. You know what that means? That means they were only caught doing it to one person, because there was more than one. It's never the first one that you get caught for. It's always the latter.
The times 10 multiplier theory, right? So you know that it's at least 10 times more than that. But
yeah, honestly, I saw that this thread, but it's time for the Portland police to start arresting federal agents because that ain't happening. That's not right.
it really is time for that to happen, and
It's not right. You want to know how you can really bridge the gap?
Your police department can use those tanks, rocket launchers, grenades.
You want to know what will truly bring a connection between people and police? If the police is motherfucking arresting the federal government.
If they start, like I said,
everyone will be walking
weapons of mass destruction.
That happens.
Those weapons of mass destruction that they're allowed to own for God knows what reason, and also if they're allowed to use those high tempers and quick draw McGraw personalities like Wild Wild West type shit that they want to do with people of color, you know, you want to go out and shoot people. Well, here you go. You have federal agents abducting your citizens. If there was ever a reason for police brutality, that's it right there.
Look, if I can't think of a quicker solution to the police versus citizen paradigm that currently afflicts us all, if I can't think of a quicker solution than Portland police marching up and like basically telling the federal government to, first of all, fuck off, and second of all, you're invading and, you know, coming into our space. This is where we operate. I like nothing. I don't think anything that I can think of would resolve the problem between people and police than if the police was like standing up actually for the people to tell the federal government, nah, this ain't cool. You're not doing it the right way. If you want to pick up a person, fine, but do it in a marked vehicle, identify yourself, tell them exactly what's going on. Don't just steal them in the middle of the night type of shit. That is literally what Nazi Germany did. That's not like, it's what they did it's what they did in Russia during the Soviet Union. Like, this isn't, we've seen this game before. This is how it starts, or this is how it continues. I wouldn't say this is how it starts. It starts with chastising doctors, medical professionals, and journalists. That's how it starts. Then you have the Gestapo coming in and taking people who dissent from the trope of Germany's number one, everyone else needs to just get in line. I mean, how is this not the next phase within the fall of or within the tyrannical rise of a society, which will then subsequently fall, because that's how they all happen.
It's disgusting, dude. But I will tell you this: if the Portland police does step up to the plate, I swear to God, I'll put on a Blue Lives Matter T-shirt.
Well, I'm moving to Portland. I'll move to Portland.
I'll put on a Blue Lives Matter T-shirt on this show, and let's go. I'll do it right here. But they got to step up to the plate first.
Look, man. Yeah, you want to talk about bridging the gap? That would be, dude, if the chief of police from Portland just comes out and is like, if we see some motherfuckers in unmarked vehicles abducting our citizens, we're coming after you. I don't give a shit if you are federal government or not. If he came out and straight up said that and then started enforcing that, you would have, I mean, this would be the most lockstep action taken by American citizens since everyone flying a flag post 9/11. Like, everyone would be like, fuck yeah. Now everyone, like every other police department, follow suit, protect your citizens. Don't, you know, this is what you're supposed to do. You protect your citizens.
It would be the most lockstep thing since the American Revolution. Are you kidding me? Like,
all the people
non-loyalists that actually stood up.
They loved Britain back then.
I know, but I'm talking about actual Americans. If you love Britain, you were probably just a loyalist, and I don't know if you count as being American, but that's, yeah. I mean, it would honestly be an incredible act of, and to be completely honest, it's really what needs to be done. Like, you cannot have people disappear on the street. It's unconstitutional. It is not right. It is certainly illegal. This is what we pay a police department for, to protect us against shit like this. Or, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you can't turn to the military, which is sort of what we really pay this type of money for, to defend against foreign invaders, right? Because if you're unmarked, all I know is you're a foreign invader, right? If you can't pay the military to protect us, it is literally the responsibility of the police department to be able to protect that. But I mean, it's in their title, right? It's protect and serve, and this is exactly what constitutes that. But I think, of course, you know, a lot of police chiefs, a lot of politicians are sort of afraid to stand up to whatever might happen next. And
I think really that's the way to go, man. If you know, if
he makes suggestions, can call Portland and be like, hey, you have this ability to do this.
You know, if defund the police truly means reinvesting in your local community, so people who feel desperate don't feel so desperate anymore. If the police takes an active stance against a tyrannical federal government that is literally abducting people in the middle of the night, that will effectively undo so many of the problems that exist within our current environment that
It might even
we
get us
would
to
see
stop the defund the
immediate
police
and
movement.
radical change overnight.
Exactly. It might even get us to stop the defund the police movement, honestly. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing, but the pressure would be off of police if they could step up to the plate and honestly prove that they're worth the money. Then
People would
we
start
wouldn't.
seeing them. People would start seeing them as, as pillars of the community, as people that are sworn to protect and help the people that live there, versus an institution of the government to exact its pound of flesh.
Absolutely. See them as friends instead of somebody that you need to like be careful around when you're driving and you see one, right? And you don't want to get pulled over for
I think
some
in
dumbass.
general, that mentality needs to permeate the community and all communities in general, from people to police, police to people to people. Once we truly obtain a ubiquity for seeing everyone as human and everyone as an ally versus an enemy or as something to be feared because you don't know, that's when I think we'll really see not just the US but worldwide. If people start taking that mentality, that's when you'll really start to see true progress and flourishment of the human race in general. That's when you'll really start to see incredible developments in the medical world, in the cosmological world, in the infrastructural world, is by working together and by eliminating all of the fears that separate us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree with that completely.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for hopping on. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of open yourself up to everyone and talk about your unicorn story, which
Yeah.
is a wonderful parallel to Lion King, with all of the different animals working together to a common good. I can totally see the commonalities there. I think you guys are doing a great thing, and I can't wait to read the finished product, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me talk about my book. And until next time, my friend, we'll get this party going again on another day.
I'll catch you later, man. Have a good one.